You learned to be strong too early, not because you wanted to, but because no one was there. You came home to silence. You let yourself in. You grabbed something to eat. You figured things out on your own. And now that you're a parent, that childhood never really left. It still shapes how you show up. The generation once told to play outside and be home by the streetlights is now criticized for being too involved in their children's lives. That contradiction explains almost everything about Gen X parents. If you grew up in the 60s, 70s, or early 80s, this probably feels familiar. Coming home to an empty house wasn't unusual. It was normal. Your parents were at work, both of them. For the first time in history, this was happening on a massive scale. Between 1969 and 1990, the share of mothers with children under 6 in the workforce rose from about 36% to nearly 60%, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. You were a latchkey kid. You let yourself in. You made something to eat, and you moved on. A 2004 study by Reach Advisors described Gen X as one of the least parented and least nurtured generations in U.S. history. That wasn't exaggeration. You learned to solve your own problems because there wasn't another option. Your mom wasn't calling the school to argue your grades. Your dad wasn't stepping into your friendship drama. He told you to handle it yourself, or not at all. That daily independence shaped how you saw the world, but it came with something else. Emotional self-reliance. It looked like strength, but often felt like loneliness. Fast forward to today, and a clear pattern appears in how people talk about Gen X parents. Many of them openly say their latchkey childhood still affects them. They reflect on it, and with surprising honesty, they admit they chose to parent differently, to be more present, more involved. Not because it was trendy, but as a direct response to what they didn't have growing up. When Gen X parents step into their kids' problems, they can seem more protective than the generation before them. They've even been called stealth fighter parents. They're not hovering all the time, but when something truly matters, they go all in. Most of the time, they let kids handle their own issues. But when something serious happens, they show up to the principal's office ready to fight, with an intensity that surprises everyone. This wasn't the plan. Many Gen X parents swore they wouldn't be overbearing. They valued the freedom they had as kids, but then they became parents. And something shifted. The memory of empty houses, of solving problems alone, of wondering if anyone was really paying attention. All of it comes back when you're the one raising a child now. So what happens when you parent based on how you were raised? A psychologist named Diana Baumrind spent years studying parenting styles. She found that most fall into categories defined by two things: responsiveness, how emotionally warm and available parents are, and demandingness, how much structure, rules, and expectations they set. The authoritative style scores high on both. These parents are emotionally present, and they still enforce clear boundaries. This isn't authoritarian parenting. That's strict rules with little emotional support. And it's not permissive parenting either. That's warmth without limits. Authoritative parenting sounds more like this: I care about you, I'm here for you, but your choices still have consequences. Decades of research show consistent results. Kids raised this way manage emotions better. They have higher self-esteem. They solve problems more effectively, and they experience less anxiety and depression. They tend to do better in school, and they build stronger friendships. There's no large-scale study proving that Gen X parents, as a group, use authoritative parenting. But when you listen to how they describe their approach, being present without smothering, setting boundaries while staying warm, showing up but allowing struggle, it maps onto that model almost perfectly. Gen X understands struggle in a specific way. They entered adulthood during recessions. They watched stable pensions disappear. They saw job security fade into something their parents had, but they wouldn't. Growing up knowing the system won't always protect you changes how you prepare your kids for life. You can't promise stability, so instead, You try to make them resilient enough to handle uncertainty. But Gen X is doing all of this in a world nothing like the one they grew up in. They're the first generation raising kids in the age of social media, where everything can be compared, judged, and remembered forever. For people who grew up with real privacy, this feels unnatural. Mistakes didn't live online. Embarrassing moments disappeared. Sharing every milestone publicly doesn't come easily. And this may be part of why Gen X parents often seem emotionally tired. They're caring for aging parents, facing career plateaus, managing financial pressure, all while trying to give their kids something better, without making them fragile. They're the sandwich generation, caught between boomer parents who think they're too soft and Gen Z kids who sometimes think they're too strict. They're constantly translating between worlds that no longer speak the same language. Your parents think you're too soft. Your kids think you're too hard. And you're stuck trying to keep what mattered from your upbringing: independence, resilience, while adding what you wish you'd had: emotional presence, attention, the feeling that someone really saw you. What's interesting is that Gen X parents don't worry much about external approval. Being a latchkey kid taught them something early: validation from the outside isn't reliable. So they parent using an internal compass, shaped by their own memories of childhood. That's why they might let a teenager make the same mistake twice, because sometimes repetition is how learning actually happens. But they'll also be there at 2 in the morning when everything falls apart. No judgment, just support. They remember what it was like to have no one to call. Technology plays a role here too. Gen X remembers life before the internet, before smartphones took over, before constant stimulation. They grew up when boredom was normal, and entertainment had to be invented. They know what real presence feels like because they lived in both worlds. So when they set limits around screens, it's not driven by panic. It comes from experience. They understand the tools, but they question the cost. They're more comfortable with technology than their boomer parents, and more skeptical of it than their own kids. So when you see a Gen X parent at a school event looking uneasy around hyper-involved parents, but still fully present for their child, it may seem contradictory. But they're trying to raise kids who feel both secure and independent. Kids who know someone has their back, and also know how to handle things on their own. It's not perfect, and it doesn't always match what parenting experts recommend. But for a generation once labeled one of the least nurtured in American history, showing up emotionally matters. They're trying to break the cycle while keeping what worked. And that's complicated, messy, hard to categorize. Maybe that's the point. Gen X was never interested in fitting into neat boxes anyway. If this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe.